In this video, we are going to focus on the classification of manufacturing costs according to behavior. Previously, we classified in general when we've referred to direct material costs, direct labor costs, and factory overheads. That's the general classification. Now we are classifying according to behavior. So in addition to classifying manufacturing costs into direct material costs, direct labor costs and manufacturing overheads, manufacturing costs are often also classified according to their cost behavior. The term cost behavior refers to the behavior of a specific manufacturing cost in relation to changes in production levels. In other words, the number of units produced. How does the cost change as the number of units produced either increase or decrease? That's what it's all about. So manufacturing costs are classified in the following four groups according to their cost behavior. We have the fixed costs, the variable costs, the semi-variable costs, and the semi-fixed costs or step costs. So let's first focus on the fixed costs. Fixed costs do not vary according to changing levels of production. So no matter how many units we produce, the cost stays the same. So even if production is stopped, these costs will still be incurred. Fixed costs are constant at all levels of production. An example is the rent paid for a factory. The amount paid for rent remains constant irrespective of the number of units that are produced. Even if no units are produced, the same amount of rent must still be paid. So rent do not vary according to the production level. We have a fixed contract to pay a certain amount of rent, irrespective of how much we produce. So graphically, the cost stays the same, no matter how many units we produce. The variable costs vary according to the number of units produced. If production stops, these costs will no longer be incurred. Variable costs are directly proportional to the level of production. The more we produce, the more the cost will be. The less we produce, the less the cost will be. Example, direct material costs and direct labor costs display variable cost behavior. A manufacturer who produces leather belts pays 10 Rand for a belt buckle. If 50 belts are produced, then the cost for belt buckles will be 500 Rand, the 50 times 10. If no belts are produced, then the cost for buckles will be 0. So, graphically, the more units we produce, the higher the cost. Semi-variable costs have both a fixed and a variable component. The fixed component is the minimum cost that will be incurred, even if no units are produced, and the variable component increases as production levels increase. So this is basically just a combination of fixed and variable costs. If production stops, only the fixed component of the cost is incurred. An example is the electricity cost for a factory. There is a fixed monthly charge that must be paid even if no electricity has been used. The fixed component. The electricity cost will then increase as production increases. Since the machinery will use more electricity, the variable component. So graphically, we have the fixed component as indicated in the dotted line. So even if we produce 0 units, we will have a costs. And then as the production increase, the variable component will increase so that the semi-variable in totality will also increase. So remember, the variable one started at the 0 line and went up as number of units increase. But semi-variable starts at the fixed cost part and continue or increase as more units are produced. And then finally we have the semi-fixed or step costs. Semi-fixed costs are costs that are fixed up to a certain level of production. If production exceeds this level or more than that level, then these costs increase in steps. As an example, a machine can produce a maximum of 1,000 units per day. If more than 1,000 units have to be produced in a day, then a second machine is required. If more than 2,000 units is produced, if we continue the pattern, a third machine will be used. So each time we reach a certain capacity, it jumps up and the costs increase. And then when we get a certain number of units, then the costs jump up again. So let's just compare again the general classification and the classification according to behavior. It is important that the classification of manufacturing costs according to behavior is not confused with the general classification. The general classification is direct material costs, direct labor costs, and manufacturing overhead. Therefore, the same cost may be categorized using both classifications. For example, a raw material used to make a product is a direct material cost as well as a variable cost. Factory rental is a manufacturing overhead as well as a fixed cost. So we can see that the direct material is the general classification for the raw material, whereas the variable cost is the behavior, the cost behavior. Factory rental, the manufacturing overhead is the general classification, whereas the fixed cost is the behavior classification. So let's do some calculations using fixed and variable costs. For the purpose of this section, we will ignore the semi-variable costs and the semi-fixed costs. So we keep it simple and categorize manufacturing costs as either fixed or variable. Now, total manufacturing costs. The total manufacturing cost of a product may be calculated by adding the fixed and the variable costs involved in the manufacturing process. Remember, when it comes to the general classification, we said that direct material costs plus direct labor plus manufacturing overheads will result in our total manufacturing cost. So now by behavior, we take a different approach that will result in the same answer. We just add the variable costs and the fixed costs together, and we will also obtain the total manufacturing costs. So in equation form, total manufacturing costs according to behavior is equal to the fixed costs plus the variable costs. The unit cost, when we think of a unit, we think of one item. How much does one item cost to manufacture? So the unit cost is calculated by dividing the total manufacturing cost by the total number of units produced. So it's just an average. So in equation form, unit cost of a product is the total manufacturing cost divided by the number of units produced. Okay, so let's work through an example to illustrate this. So as the level of production increases, we know the variable cost will increase proportionally while the fixed cost remains constant. From this it follows that the unit cost of a product decreases as the number of units produced increases. That is because of the fact that the fixed cost remains constant. So the more items we produce, the more each contribute to covering that fixed cost, and therefore the cost of one unit will reduce. Let's illustrate this by an example. So let's say we have our number of units produced is 100. And let's say the variable cost is 1,000 Rand. So in other words, it's 10 Rand per unit. 100 times 10 gives 1,000 Rand. Let's say we have a fixed cost of 5,000. So that will stay constant no matter how many units we produce. So what's our total manufacturing cost now? It is the variable cost of 1,000 plus the fixed cost of 5,000, which result in a total manufacturing cost of 6,000. To get the unit cost, we now need to divide the 6,000 by the number of units, namely 100. And that will result in a 60 Rand. Now let's say we increase the number of units produced to 500. What will our variable cost be? Well, we said it is 10 Rand per item. So 500 times 10 should give us 5,000 Rand. Our fixed cost, however, won't change at all. Even though we produce now more, the fixed cost still remains at 5,000 Rand. Now our total manufacturing cost is the variable cost of 5,000 plus the fixed cost of 5,000, which will result in 10,000 Rand. And now we need to divide this total manufacturing cost of 10,000 Rand by the number of units of 500. And then we will get 20 Rand. So the unit cost now drastically reduced from 60 Rand per unit to 20 Rand. So it's now much easier to make a much bigger profit. Let's even now double the number of units produced from 500 to 1,000 units. So now it's 1,000 times 10 Rand for our variable cost, which is 10,000 Rand. So as the number of units doubled, our variable costs also doubled. But the fixed cost will remain constant at 5,000 Rand. So now the total manufacturing cost is the variable cost of 10,000 plus the fixed cost of 5,000 for a 15,000 Rand total manufacturing cost. We need to divide that now by the 1,000 units produced to get a unit cost of 15 Rand. So our unit costs reduce even a little bit more. And as indicated, this is because the fixed cost is now shared by more items. So from this table we see that the variable cost per unit is constant, namely 10 Rand per unit. So the variable cost per unit, we have the 10,000 divided by 100, or rather the 1,000 divided by 100, and the 5,000 divided by 500, and the 10,000 divided by 1,000. They all result in an answer of 10 Rand. That's why the unit cost, the variable cost per unit is constant, while the fixed cost per unit decreases as the level of production increases. Because originally we have a 5,000 divided by 100, which is 50 Rand, the fixed cost of 50 Rand per unit. But as we produce more units, we have the 5,000 divided by 500 Rand. It reduces the fixed cost per unit to 10 Rand. And then if we have 1,000 units, it will reduce the fixed cost per unit to 5 Rand.